All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Heritage Kingston meeting. As this is the first for the year for 2022, I will be starting it off in order for us to run the election of officers. We currently have quorum. Everyone is present with the exception of Ms. O'Reilly, who I've not heard from yet, so I hope she will be joining us shortly. From staff, we do currently have in the meeting Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Philip Perrell, Intermediate Planner, Alex Rose Thompson, Planner, myself, Elizabeth Fawcett as Committee Clerk.
Hello.
And Derek O'Shea is joining us as well as the meeting host. We also have approximately 2 or 3 applicants and agents who are currently with us in the meeting, and we have no members of the public watching from the gallery. So with that, we will go ahead and get started with the election of officers. If there's anyone who would like to nominate an individual for the role of chair, please. Mr. Taylor.
I nominate Peter Gower for chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gower, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I would.
Excellent. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Oosterhoff, thank you. All right. Are there any other nominations for the role of chair for Heritage Kingston? Seeing none, I will close nominations and call the vote. All those in favor for Peter Gower as chair, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? And that carries. All right, and we will go to the nominations for vice chair. Is there anyone who would like to nominate Mr. Smith? Not sure if Mr. Smith is having, oh, there we go.
I'm just having some trouble with the computer here. So no, I wasn't trying to do anything, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Is there anyone who would like to nominate an individual for the role of vice chair? Ms. McFarlane?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Don Taylor if he's willing.
All right, Mr. Taylor, do you accept? You are on.
Yes, I accept. Thank you.
Okay, and then is there a seconder? I see Councillor Doherty, thank you. Are there any other nominations for the role of vice chair? Okay, seeing none, I will close nominations and call the vote. All those in favor for Don Taylor as vice chair? Okay, any opposed? And that carries. With that, I will turn the meeting over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Meeting comes to order then, and I think the first order is to welcome a new member, Jelinka Burney. Welcome, Jelinka. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Remembering you have to unmute first, that's right.
Yeah, I'm well schooled in video chat, thanks to my company. My name is Jelinka Burney. I have a bachelor's in archaeology, and I currently work at a survey firm here in Kingston. I'm originally from the Orangeville area, and my husband and I recently moved here to Kingston last year, and to help open up another office here that we had purchased with my company. So I help manage our office here. It's a 100-year-old survey firm, so a lot of rich history. And when we came to open it 2 years ago, I fell in love with Kingston, and I asked if I could move here, and the bosses gave the okay. So, and the rest is history.
Great, thank you very much and welcome. Approval of the agenda. You had emailed to you an addendum which will go as item 9DV on 85 Sydenham Street. So, Elizabeth, do we need a separate motion to put that in before we vote on the agenda, or can we just assume it's already in?
Mr. Chair, since you've made mention of it, that's fine to include it in the overall
Okay.
motion for approval.
So the overall motion for the agenda that includes that addendum for 85 Sydenham. It also includes, which is not actually written under other business, the answer to my question 2 months ago on Princess Street United Church. And there will also, I've been told, actually, because I'm doing it, be a question on the Market Square Heritage Conservation District budget for 2022. Is there any other additions that you want to make to the agenda? And if not, I look for a motion to approve the amended agenda made by Jennifer Dimter, seconded by Don Mitchell. Further discussion? Seeing none then, those in favor of the amended agenda? And those opposed? And that carries. You've got an amended agenda. The confirmation of the minutes of November the 17th. There is one addition on page 8. Don Taylor has asked to have added on to the end of the paragraph which starts, Mr. Taylor commented. This is on the front porch at 9 Kennedy, and suggested that its appearance could be improved by reducing the cross-section of the posts and chamfering the edges. Is that correct, Don? Thank you. And I believe the clerk has this already. Any comments, discussion on that, or any further amendments to those November minutes? And seeing none, I look for a mover for the approval of the amended November minutes. And I see Jennifer and I see Don Taylor. Further discussion? Seeing none, voting in favor. If you were present at the meeting, those in favor, those opposed, and that carries. And I didn't count, but it would be 7 and 3 not voting, I believe. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Jennifer?
I have pecuniary interest in the consultation with the National Wall of Remembrance Association.
Okay, and I think we've understood how you're going to work that out, i.e. you don't have to leave the meeting, which used to be the situation, and you can't move to sit with the presenters. So we'll just remember that Jennifer is has pecuniary interest in that matter. Any other items of pecuniary interest? And I'll make my usual comment that if, as we go through the meeting, if you suddenly realize that you had forgotten or things have changed, please declare it as soon as you can. I believe we have no presentations and no delegations. So we come down to briefings, and Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, talking about the National Wall of Remembrance project. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, and congratulations on your chairship. And,
oh, thank you. Thank you for the campaign and everything. Yes.
And through you. Yeah, it's my pleasure this morning just to introduce to the committee, the National Wall of Remembrance Association. The report that was submitted is an introduction to the project, which was approved by Council in 2019. This is a project that will see the installation of a national wall of remembrance within a city space. And the space under consideration for discussion is McDonald Park. And so the details will be provided on the file by, as you've just heard, Jen Demeter, but also in support with Bruce and Gary, who have both been joining today, who are members of their board or their committee helping to lead this process. So not much more to share than that at this time, but really thankful for committee for taking the time to consider this application and to provide some direction and some thoughts to the group to help them move this project forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So formally we move on to 9A, which is the report. And
sorry,
Jennifer,
Mr. Chair, to interrupt. We do have an actual presentation from the Remembrance Group, so we'll just allow them to present first before we move into the business.
Oh, you want to fit that into briefings? Okay, okay. Okay, and who is giving the presentation?
Gary's to start, and I think he just has to unmute. Is that how it works?
That is correct. I'm just asking Gary here if he can unmute for us. No, he's still having a bit of issue here. I'm sorry, Mr. Coulter, we can't hear you yet. There we go.
Good.
Excellent.
Good. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. My job is to give you some historical background about our association and our project. The National Wall of Remembrance Association was created in 2010, and since 2014, with the assistance of Media Northside, an Ottawa-based publishing company, we've produced 7 volumes of a magazine called Remembrance and 2 volumes of Remembrance Souvenir, moving to the bilingual format. Advertising sales and donations have generated in excess of $1.4 million. So we're well fixed to do this project. According to Veterans Affairs Canada, there are 6,293 memorials registered in its national inventory of military memorials. Generally, these commemorate local involvement. We have contracted with Picture This on Granite, a Quebec-based company with international list of satisfied customers. And the towers, 4 towers, will be etched with images chosen by a group composed of experts in the various eras in our military history. Bruce, following me, will provide more details in his presentation. Since the unanimous approval of the motion by City Council on 9 July 2019, a lot of work and effort has occurred through meetings with city staff. Slide 5, please. Why have we chosen Kingston? Our city was an important part in our early Canadian history, and the military presence was and still is a major influence here. Kingston is the birthplace of much of our early armed forces and the Northwest Mounted Police, the home of the Royal Military College, Fort Frontenac, and Fort Henry. Canadian Forces Base Kingston is the largest military base in personnel in Canada and the largest employer in Kingston. Our proposed location and the layout of our memorial by the Murney Tower would be an appealing public space and bring national recognition to our city. Our entire memorial project will be built at no cost to Kingston, including an endowment fund for future upkeep. The Limestone City is the natural choice for a wall of remembrance. Thank you. Over to you, Bruce.
Next slide. Our memorial represents the more than 118,000 fallen Canadians from every conflict in which our nation, even pre-Confederation, has participated. No other such memorial representing all of the fallen exists anywhere in Canada. It is not just another simple military monument commemorating one activity or event. It is also different from other memorials in that it has several complementary initiatives which also help reflect positively on Kingston. First, our 2 websites, WORassociation.ca is our overall project site, whereas CanadianFallen.ca is our virtual wall where information about the 118,000 plus fallen Canadians can be found. We also have 2 secondary objectives with cross-Canada appeal. Our Community Memorial Program provides funds to communities to renovate their memorials and is now in its 3rd year. Our education program is a partnership with a team of teachers called Lest We Forget, who work with schools in the locations where we provide renovation funding. Students learn by doing research about the fallen from their communities. We have also initiated some writing competitions, and the best content from that research will be used to help improve our websites and also provide information for our physical memorial. Finally, having just completed volume 9 and distributed 10,000 free copies across Canada, we plan to continue to produce our magazine Remembrance Souvenir annually. The stories in the magazine focus on individuals and their sacrifices and are inclusive of Indigenous personnel, females, etc. Next slide. The memorial itself comprises 4 8-foot tall, 3-sided granite towers placed within a poppy-shaped landscape around a compass design on the ground. The poppy represents the act of remembrance, while the compass indicates Canada's service around the world. Jen will illustrate that shortly. The 12 sides of the 4 3-sided towers will be laser engraved with a mix of individual photos and collages representing the various eras throughout Canadian military history. These areas and the photos will be chosen by a team of experts, including members from the Kingston City staff, and again, will be inclusive. Information about them will be provided through QR codes linked through the Kingston Digitization Initiative. In the very middle of the memorial will be a Canadian flag which represents the service by the fallen to the nation. Next slide, over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Bruce. So the proposed site is located in the east portion of McDonald Park, which is south of KGH, kitty corner to City Park between King Street and Lake Ontario. It's home to some pretty important built heritage, such as the Murney Tower, which is a part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Richardson Bathhouse, whose renovations we've recently seen go through heritage, the Newlands Pavilion, where I got married, as well as home to other monuments and memorials. Next slide, please, Dirk. The site has a varied and rich history, especially as it pertains to both military and leisure. So this is going to be very much the Coles Notes version, as the Stage 1 archaeological report is actually 98 pages long. So the east portion of the site forms part of the original Farm Lot 25, surveyed in 1783. It was sold to Captain Murney in 1809, and then it was subsequently seized by the Crown for the War of 1812, when the blockhouse, a barracks were constructed, as well as batteries and a raised redan along the south shore. It was returned back to the Murneys and their tenants, only to be acquired in 1840 by the government as part of a defensive strategy. Here we see the site completely leveled, building trees and all. And in 1846, the Murney Tower was built, and it was used until 1885. It was actually during this time that Kingstonians began to use the area for leisure. We see bathing, we see picnicking, and we even see tobogganing. So the Department of Militia and Defense leased the area surrounding the tower to the city in 1888. And over the next 30 years or so, you see the park becoming much of what it is today, minus the parking lot. And in 1967, the land was given to the city. And we think since it has such a robust military history that this is actually a perfect location for the memorial. Next slide, please, Dirk. So besides being respectful of its heritage, we needed to take into account the current and future plans for the site, both possible and probable. So we spent a lot of time on site this summer, and we consulted with the Parks and Shorelines Department within Engineering Services, who have no objections to this location. Next slide, please, Dirk. So a path along King Street is proposed in the city's master plan, and we propose the main accessible interest be off that path. We also wanted to site the project a respectful distance from the existing built heritage, and we wanted to be respectful in our interventions to the landscape itself. So the trees that are removed will be replaced, possibly with new trees from acorns from the oaks of Vimy Ridge, as well as current plantings that are disturbed will be relocated and reincorporated into the park. Next slide, please. So the initial concept is the compass, the center being the site as the compass rose and the pillars as the arrows pointing to the cardinal directions. And I think this is really emblematic for the entire project, something that is localized, but really expands beyond. Next slide, please. So we wanted this physical manifestation of the project to be reflective of its site. So we were mindful to incorporate views of the built heritage, with the pillars framing the views both to the tower and to the bathhouse. We took inspiration from the site in its massing, with subtle berming around the plaza, referencing the landscape around the tower and the raised redan from the War of 1812. Next slide, please. We also wanted to reference the site in the materiality. So the retaining walls, as well as the north, south, east, and west markers are to be of locally sourced limestone. Again, coming back to this idea of being localized, but expanding out, the benches at every pillar are to be stone sourced from all over Canada. Next slide, please. So the basis of the project is remembrance, with the shape of the plaza itself being reminiscent of a poppy. In the center of the poppy is a band with the words, "Lest we forget." The south pillar is split to allow for a sliver of light between. Depending on weather, every day in various capacities around 1 p.m., this light aligns and highlights the Lest We Forget band. Next slide, please. So yeah, we'd love any feedback, comments, suggestions.
Okay. I'm going to have a question later on, but who has a question now that we can deal with first? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that presentation. I really think it's a great design. Great is the wrong word. I'm just trying to find the right word, because I've been to a lot of memorials around the world, in Europe and Asia, and they vary. And as well as in North America, they vary from almost glorifying war to telling the horrors of war. But this seems to have a really nice balance of truly being a remembrance space. I really like the compass and the poppy. That's very, very meaningful. So my question is, what kind of plaque and how do you explain what people are looking at? Is there a plaque, and what would the plaque say?
Bruce, can you talk to that?
Yeah, very briefly. So the plaque itself, there will be a plaque near the entrance, and it will just, we haven't got into the details, but it will just explain a bit about the memorial itself. But on the 4 granite pillars, we're going to have primary pictures, but we'll be using the QR codes, which will go into depth about the various eras and campaigns and battles. So there won't be many words overall throughout the memorial, other than on that initial plaque that just introduces it. And again, we haven't developed the specifics of what that initial plaque will say yet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, thanks. I am curious about what information will be accessed via the Q code. Yeah.
So that, again, that's going to be information about each of the eras that we develop. Remember, there's 4 pillars, 12 sides, basically. 10 of those sides will be used initially. We're saving 2 sides for future, okay? Each of those sides, we're going to choose an era of, for example, World War II or pre-Confederation or War of 1812. We haven't determined exactly what they are yet. We're doing that in consultation with the city and other historians. And then those QR codes, again, we haven't determined exactly what they're going to say, but for example, let's take, if we have an era called pre-Confederation, there will be a couple of paragraphs explaining a bit about pre-Confederation, any wars, campaigns that were fought, and the sacrifices that Canadians made during that. For example, it might say, 63 Canadians were killed during the Fenian raids, okay, and such. Again, we're still developing that stuff with some of the profs that we have, some from Lest We Forget, and it's going to take us a bit of time, but we're not going to put like 10 chapters of information about the War of 1812. It'll be a couple of paragraphs to be developed.
Right.
Can I interject? But okay. Yeah. So Councillor, you're saying that at the entrance plaque that we should explain the plaza as anyway, and then maybe we could have a QR code that gets into the specifics of the plaza within the entrance plaque or something like that.
No, I was just asking what people would see. I would say people always look for a plaque, and of course we still have, not everybody knows how to use the codes.
I know.
It's a generational thing too, and we have to remember seniors and everybody who may not have technology as well too. So yeah, no, I was just trying to imagine what it is that we're going to have here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Very, very exciting. I like everything of it. Did I miss it? What's the timeline for this? When would we, is it in 2022, or how quickly is things moving forward?
It seems to be a moving target. excuse me, we are ready to go pretty quickly, but we recognize that there's considerations of, parks and whatnot. All that has to be done. We're looking at probably the next 2 or 3 years, realistically.
Okay, good, yeah. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, something to think about is that we could, in the spring, then we could actually have a look. I love that park. I love that area. I think it's going to be a really great location and everything about it. So it's an idea if we ever wanted to have a look there. And but I'm excited to see this, and just want to encourage you to keep up the great work. Thanks.
I think it's going to generate a lot of interest across Canada, and we're having an impact with these secondary projects. People are writing to us saying how wonderful it is, and it's going to be a good thing.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you both, Don Mitchell.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Is this questions only or questions and comment at this point?
I will accept comments or questions because I won't know till you get to the end.
Okay, so thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question would be, how much of this design is already fixed and informed by a process that we're not aware of? Hesitate to use the word constraints, but I'm just trying to get a sense of how much this has to be the physical hard surface structure that's been created versus freedom to nuance it with other sensory and ways of engaging space. I just wonder if someone can answer that. And then as an artist, I have a number of tangents I'll throw at you.
I'll leave that to Jennifer to answer.
I mean, it's definitely a process we've worked with, that they've been working with the city for the last 2 years. So the pillars themselves are fairly fixed pieces within that landscape. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely open to suggestions. I am for sure ways to better the project. So throw some ideas out. That's great.
Okay. Can I just add one thing?
Yep.
Yes, we are open to suggestions, but there are a few things that we definitely want to maintain, such as the poppy design in it and the cardinal compass and the Canadian flag. And this is why we actually hired Jen as an architect to help us take our original concepts and morphed it. And we've morphed it quite a bit actually from our original ideas.
Thank you for that. So I believe that one of the things about this committee and all people and everything is that it's our collective engagement, experience, and strength and all of our diversity that actually helps us make the best decisions for all of us. So none of this is meant as criticism. Please don't take it that way. And none of it is intended to be critical at all. I wish we'd seen this ahead of time because I'd have more time to compile my thoughts, but I'm just going to throw a number of ideas or tangents at you. It may be actually fewer than I thought, but the first thing I looked at it was from a barrier-free design. The whole world of barrier-free and accessibility is changing. It's very fluid. So many people are pushing back now against a very flat world. People want variety, they want slopes, they want engagements, they want curves. When we talk accessibility, 70% of accessibility is invisible. And so I cannot imagine, and I'm born of a different generation, but when we get into what this represents, the sense of smell, the sensory of sight, varying smell, varying sight, varying hearing, the sense of touch, so how these masses heat up in the sun, all of those types of things inform us of place. They give us location and a way of engaging. And so looking at this, I had wondered whether that had been explored yet. And I know Parks often pushes back against plantings, et cetera, because they take a lot of maintenance. But I'm thinking about how the fullest diversity would engage this. By the by the same token too, I think people have a tendency to tune out dark against dark, and even with pictures and even with lettering and etching and everything on it, it would be nice if there were varied ways that people could engage it. So I'll use 3 dimensions as a way of engagement, as opposed to 2 dimensions, and that's not withstanding. It's a 3-dimensional structure when you get back from a distance. The inert versus the living really grabbed me, and so I wanted a sense of the living passing through the actual monument, as opposed to it's sort of pushed out to the outside, and the monument itself is sort of this non-living. And I just think it would be nice to try and throw some of those in. Huge positives about the QR codes, huge positives about everything that you mentioned that is not represented within the monument itself, but that people can take away and engage, is huge for accessibility, huge for all people. And as you say, it will have huge national attention. I don't want to waste too much time on people. The other thing that I would really hope for is a strong connection to the existing park, because I think that the laughter and the joy and the engagement of the park space itself and the play areas, et cetera, it would be nice to have that living connection between the two. And the final thing I will say is that in this area, that Newlands Pavilion is used by community associations and other people for gatherings. And so therefore that area is also used for larger groups of people and space. So I would want you to consider that. And I also know that Tai Chi, particularly during COVID, has also been working out there as well. And so just the sense of how it would function with larger groups of people of say 50 to 100 people who want to do activities in that area of the city right up against the water. All for your consideration. No intention of critical, just thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Don. Yeah, I really like the idea of smell. I think that's super important for sure. And definitely, like as we go further into the design, this is sort of just preliminary. We'll definitely look more into the accessibility. Yeah, a definitely interesting way to take it. And yeah, we definitely, like, it's sited back in an area that's actually not used as much. Like away from the pavilion and where they do like the dog training classes and all that kind of stuff. We definitely want it to be more integrated into the park. That's something we've been in discussions with the park or with Parks and Shoreline with. It's just they don't have time right now to sort of retweak the master plan, and that probably won't be done for a while. So the only thing that we had to work with really was that street along, or the new path along King Street. But yeah, we definitely see this eventually getting worked into the park more holistically. I think that's
it might be worthwhile mentioning the actual footprint size of the installation.
Yes.
Put it into context of how big it is or how small it is compared to the park.
Yes, I don't have those numbers in front of me. It's on the slide.
Well, it's approximately 60 feet square, isn't it? Something like that?
50 to 60. Sorry, I don't have the drawing in. Thank you, Derek. 50 feet, 15.24 meters. I guess it was cut off.
So it'll be significant, but it won't dominate the park.
No, and we didn't want it to. Like, it's an important park with its own history, and that was important to us.
Don Taylor.
Yes, thanks. I was very impressed with the design. I think it's wonderful. I have a couple of questions. One of the best things about the design is that it gets rid of that parking area, and that's a big plus for the park. So I hope that really happens. Question one, I think I understood that the signage is to be laser engraved granite. Are you satisfied that this will be legible and have a long lifetime and all that?
I'll answer that. So yes, we're working with Picture This Granite, who has done this for years And it's already been mentioned to us the importance of making sure that it's long lasting and legible. So we definitely will make sure that that happens. Now, the only other point is the plaque itself. We haven't determined whether that's going to be a granite engraved plaque or more like the normal bronze plaque. It will probably be more like a normal bronze plaque, but that's to be confirmed.
And Don, you have another question?
No, thank you. That's
okay.
Everything. Thank you.
Other questions? In that case, I'll jump in and ask two if I could, and they're both wearing different hats. And I hate to do this, Don. I have never disagreed with you, I don't think, on this committee before. But parking. You are right by the Murney Tower. The Murney Tower has visitors. The Murney Tower needs access to get its exhibits out because we cannot leave anything in during the winter. We've got to have better access than parking on King Street by a traffic light. So I hope you will consider something there. I'm not going to suggest what, but to see that parking disappear is a bit of a problem. The other question, which I don't need an immediate answer to Gary and Bruce, but it's one that, having been involved in the city's memorial wall, that came up with us, and that is, what do you mean by Canadian?
Well, we looked at it in a very general way. Since Canada was occupied by immigrants and we moved across the country, we just considered ourselves to be Canadians. We referred to ourselves as Canadians, whether we had the charter of, the Constitution here or not. And so we just decided that the War of 1812 would be a good jumping off place. And I'd be interested in any other ideas people have, but the more we do research on this, the more we find out. It's pretty fascinating.
That's right. It's a very complicated topic. Anyway, as long as somebody is thinking about it, because when I was involved in this originally many years ago, I was told that it was only for people who'd fought with the Canadian forces.
No,
and I strongly objected to that.
We've gone beyond that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Jennifer Campbell, sorry, I missed your hand.
Yeah, okay. I was going to respond just quickly to you as well, because the parking lot's actually not moving. We had wanted the parking lot to move, and we were in talks with the city about that. It's a much longer timeline. And there's even talk from the city that, or from engineering, that they might not move the parking lot. So like in the master plan for that site, the parking lot's supposed to move to the east side.
Yeah.
So the same amount of parking, but moved. But yeah, just with the current budgets and how sort of development's going right now, they're not really sure when they want to do that. So originally we had, talked about that with them and even helping them sort of finance that. But right now, it's going to stay where it is until the new master plan gets developed for that area.
Okay, good. Is that what you were going to say, Jennifer?
It was, thank you. And through you, I will just add to that. Yeah, the waterfront master plan, as some may know, but just for everyone's awareness, it does involve some very high level preliminary proposals for how various aspects of the waterfront would be developed through a more detailed and consultative process to come. And that's really where this project is sort of coming up alongside of. And I think this does speak as well to something that Don Mitchell asked about a little earlier, which is this notion of park integration. And the parks team has certainly been speaking to the future detailed design work that will be necessary as part of the waterfront master plan, which will consider the details of the parking, but as well as the pathways and the integration. And so initially this project, we were having discussions about advancing the detailed designs on the park for some opportunity for integration and alignment. That doesn't seem as likely to be possible given the work plans and the bump outs, quite frankly, that have happened with COVID as well in some of that planning. But at this time, I just wanted to share with everyone that, Parks has indicated that they would see this then as an object within the park that as part of future detailed design work would then be integrated. So it's kind of a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario in some regards. How do we support the introduction of this element to the park? And then how in future discussions about the detailed design improvements as part of the waterfront master plan, does this object within that park become part of a more integrated landscape? So I just wanted to share that and clarify that for everyone. And yeah. No
Good,
parking
thank
lot
you.
moving at this time.
Okay, Bruce?
Yes, Mr. Gower, I just want to go back to your question about Canada. And you are correct. When this project originally started, they were talking about post-Confederation.
Yeah.
But we have decided to expand past that. I mentioned 118,000 plus Canadians. That is taken from Veterans Affairs and the Books of Remembrance, which lists the 118,000 plus Canadians who have died and been memorialized in those books since 1867. We, in the past 2 years, have opened it up. We wanted to go before, but again, we've been looking at the same question. What exactly does that mean? Because there are a lot of militiamen and others who were killed in War of 1812 and such before that. So we are thinking exactly along the lines that you are outlining here. Hopefully,
Good, thank you
that
very much.
answers it a bit more.
Yep. Further questions, comments? Otherwise, thank you, especially Bruce and Gary for coming. And now that was briefing. Is there anything to add for item 9 business? The report is for information only. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I would just say, as it is a business item on the agenda, that we should just double check with members of the public if there's anything that
We
needs
have
to be
members of the
added
public
there.
here. Okay, members of the public, if you can raise your hands. And I'm not seeing anything there.
I'm not seeing anything either, Mr. Chair. However, I do see that Mr. Coulter was trying to add something further, but he's on mute.
I may be a member of the public, but I'm going to exit. Thank you very much.
Thanks
for the
indeed.
opportunity. It was a good experience.
Good, thank you all. And so that then covers item 9 as well, Madam Clerk, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that covers item 9A.
Yep. And so Jennifer, you are now back legally in the meeting, and we come to 9.2, update on the Kingston commemorative policy. Which will be Jennifer Campbell.
Thank you, and through you. We don't have a briefing on this. I just wanted to give a very quick introduction and remind committee that this is the annual report that we bring forward just to provide updates on the commemorations policy and requests that have been received over the course of the last year, as well as requests that are ongoing or now leading us forward. It's interesting that this comes after the National Wall of Remembrance presentation, because that is one of those recommendations or motions of council for commemoration. So is also considered within this flow of work. I did just want to draw to the committee's attention, because annually we usually get questions in some very specific areas. So I'm going to preempt perhaps some of those questions, I hope. The one that the big question we normally receive from committee is regarding the property plaques, the small plaques that are placed on designated heritage properties in the city of Kingston. And I am excited to share that this is an item that has been on the work plan for some time. And one of the initiatives that we've been able to work toward when we formed the new department was to assess some of these outstanding requests. And this is very much now in our work plan for 2022 to go back to a list, which I believe includes approximately 30 properties at this time who are seeking either repairs, updates, or the addition of a property plaque to their designated heritage property. So I did just want to share that with the committee, because it's an item that I know this committee has asked about in the past. It has been standing for some time, and we are excited that we are going to be able to move that forward in the new year. Otherwise, I'm available to answer any questions that anyone has on the report, and appreciate any feedback. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Questions on that report? And if you think of them immediately afterwards, you know where to email them to. And seeing none, then we move on to policy development and implementation. I don't believe we have anything from the heritage assets. And so we move on to stat business. It's a part 4 item 2263 Princess Street. And Alex, is that you? Alex has gone silent.
There we go. Is everyone hearing me? I just
Oh,
had a funny little
that's much
pop-up.
better. Very good.
Okay, perfect.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. So we have 2263 Princess Street, which is a Part 4 designation. So we've got an application under Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We'll be looking at the installation of skylights, as well as installing doors in a number of openings. Next slide, please. The property is located at 2263 Princess Street, which is on the south side of Princess Street and the intersection of Sydenham Road in the former village of Cataraqui. Next slide, please. So the subject property contains a 2-story limestone house with attached carriage house, as well as a stone barn constructed in 1850 by Kingston architect William Coverdale. In this application, we will be looking exclusively at the stone barn, which you see to the left of your slide. Next slide, please. So the property is designated under Part 4. That was in 2017. It has physical and design value as a complex of stone buildings that demonstrate a traditional rural and village setting. It also has historical and associative value for its connection to William Beamish, to Christchurch, and to architect William Coverdale. And contextually, it's got value for its location in the center of what was the historic community of Cataraqui. So today we're going to be looking at the 2-story limestone barn to the rear of the property with gabled roof and original openings, which is listed as a heritage attribute of the property. I will just note that staff did visit the site recently, but as well back in July. And the background to this is simply that we went out at the time to investigate the already installed double doors on the north side of the barn, as well as to talk with the applicant about the design of new windows to go into the original opening. And subsequent to that, they did receive delegated approval authority to install windows, which have not yet been installed, but they have got the heritage approval for that. So this application now is to look at the doors as well as the skylights, which were not able to be approved under delegated authority. Next slide, please. So the first proposed alteration is the installation of 3 skylight windows on the south-facing roof slope. The skylights are approximately 2 by 4 feet wide. They've got a very plain design with minimal detailing, which would be appropriate to the architectural character of this barn. Their installation appears to be relatively flush with the roof line. They're proposed to be in a black color, essentially matching the black roof and supporting their minimal visibility. In the absence of specific municipal policy regarding skylights on Part 4 heritage buildings, staff referenced the section on windows in the old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan, which advises not to create new openings on facades visible from the street. So these skylights are indeed on the south elevation of the building, so very much away from Princess Street. There won't be views visible from either the east or the southwest. And given the location and pitch of the barn roof, which is approximately 8/12, these skylights will be minimally visible and have a very neutral impact on the heritage character and attributes of the barn. Next slide, please. So the application also addresses 2 door openings on the south elevation of the building that you can see here on your slide. So right now, currently, there's the grade sort of slopes down towards the east. So you'll see towards the west, there's a full-size door opening, whereas the one to the east is much shorter. So next slide, please. So the first door opening, which was that full-size door opening to the west, it's proposed to be a painted black steel door with a large area of plain glazing. So not the decorative glazing that you see on the slide, but just simply plain glazing. Certainly this door has more of a residential than agricultural character, but in this location away from the public realm and hidden on the south, its character is slightly less of a concern. 2 Heritage Kingston members did note that the opening would read better as one single door. Unfortunately, the width of the doorway is rather large at approximately 46 inches. Another Heritage Kingston member commented that perhaps only half glazing the door inside might be more compatible with the character of the barn. And staff do not disagree with this opinion, but certainly given its proposed location, the large amount of glazing on the south elevation will help to naturally light that ground floor. And given the limited number of window openings and rather small window openings on this barn, staff are supportive of this ability to improve the lighting given the barn's future adaptive reuse. So lastly, to the east, where you saw that smaller door, there will be basically a cut steel commercial door. However, this will then be hidden by a cellar door and a gray metal. Essentially, this area is going to be regraded, and so in other words, the cellar door will basically be level to prevent water ingress down into the smaller barn door. Steel door, which will be hidden behind. So, I mean, cellar doors are a relatively traditional feature of historic properties. And given that it will be a gray color with its simple design, it's very plain. Essentially, it will not become a design feature and hopefully will blend into the surrounding limestone. Next slide, please. So the last component of this application is the already installed black steel double doors on the north elevation. So there's some consensus from responding Heritage Kingston Committee members that the general design of the doors is compatible with the heritage character of the stone barn, but there were also concerns raised about the brushed nickel hardware and hinges, as well as the gap remaining under the arch of the voussoirs. Heritage planning staff agree with this assessment of the doors design and hardware, as well as the importance of finishing this gap with an appropriate cladding. Staff have included a condition requiring that the applicant determine the possibility of replacing the existing hardware, primarily the door handles, with a black handle or a more muted tone. And in terms of the gap above the flat-headed door, staff can confirm that this gap did exist previously, but it has since become much more visibly prominent with the addition of the new steel doors. So essentially, in conversation with the applicant, they are also very keen to paint it or clad it in wood and make it a little bit more blended in. So essentially that is also included as a condition to find and either clad it with a wood veneer and paint it, or any other sort of appropriate historic finishing. So with that before you, we'll move on to the recommendation before you, which is covers those alterations we just discussed.
Of the paint for the gap that you just mentioned at the north elevation door. Would staff recommend that it would be black so that it looks like it follows the arch? I could imagine that, but I just wondered if we could speak to color there. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a helpful suggestion. It's a great comment. So for clarity, the previously approved windows that were approved through the delegated authority are proposed to be black. There was much discussion on selecting alternative color. We really worked hard persuading, but unfortunately, the owner applicant are very keen to use black. So the windows are black. Obviously, that ties into the door being black. So I think, we will have consistency in terms of the colors of the doors and the windows. Whether or not that arch is black, I think there's some opportunity potentially for an alternative color, because I'd be somewhat concerned about whether or not it would look a bit too bulky at the top there. But I would definitely leave that open to the applicant to bring something forward, and then we can have a discussion about what we think. Yeah, but it's a great question. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, members of the public, if you have questions, can you raise your hand, please? And I don't see anything there. Madam Clerk, you seeing anything?
Mr. Chair, I see no hands.
No, okay, so we move on to looking for a mover and a seconder. It's part 4, so it can be altered as well. Mover for the motion and the recommendations. Don Mitchell and Ted Smith. Is that a hand, Ted? Yes. Further discussion? Don Taylor.
Well, this has already arisen, but I really deplore the use of black in this building and many other heritage buildings. It's certainly not a heritage color. I've never seen a barn with black painted trim, and it's just a pity that there seems to be pressure nowadays for everything to be black. But I think I heard from Alex that they've done their best to twist arms and probably haven't succeeded. Thank you.
Okay, you need to go into the window making business, Don. Jane McFarlane.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Dawn about black, and I'm going to refer to the Berryfield Heritage Conservation Guideline windows, possibly doors, that black, white, or bright colors for windows is not recommended. The other thing I was going to mention was I was wondering if we could reference the barn color. There appears to be that sort of barn red, and wondering about the wood piece over the door being painted a barn red, just to reference the barn. It's a suggestion and the applicant can consider it. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Jane. Other comments from committee members? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. This is just a question, actually. I know there's concern about the color black, but isn't, when there's an alteration made to a heritage building, isn't the idea also to make things look, I guess alterations are different than additions, is that right? Because additions are not supposed to look to match the existing place, but perhaps alterations aren't. I wonder if staff could speak to that.
Sure. So
because I don't know about that.
Yeah. So no, it's a great question, and it's a tricky one. So right now we have the city's policy on window renovations in heritage buildings, which doesn't speak explicitly to color. So we don't have a lot right now in policy that is very explicit about what colors are appropriate or aren't appropriate. But it talks in certain areas. We have talked there, in the heritage conservation district plan. Sorry. They are sort of the places where there is some mention of color or heritage appropriate colors. I mean, we won't get into it here, but color at some point we can. Color is certainly controversial in that, there's opinions about wanting to provide, some flexibility to express oneself through color and appropriateness of color, but equally, certain colors will certainly not be appropriate or not bring out, won't bring out the detailing. For example, I've been trying to move people away from black and even really encourage them towards a gray or a dark gray for not just windows, but wood detailing, because certainly light does not reflect off black. And then then you lose that detail, right? You won't get those interesting details that we see on heritage buildings and that woodwork. So there's a lot of different reasons why we'd want to move towards certain colors and away from others. But at this point in time, we don't really have anything to point towards in regards to this very fashionable desire for black, which certainly is very popular. I mean, I'd say almost everybody is requesting black right now. It's very, very popular and it's become very fashionable. And it's not to say that it isn't appropriate in some situations, but certainly on this barn, I was pushing for a softer color, whether it was a neutral color, but something that tied into the warmth of the stonework, which is not a stark gray. It's actually, these stones have some yellow and kind of buffs in them. And I don't know, I mean, the applicant Tyler Buttle is on the line. They were sort of interested in that for a little while, and then they kind of came back to black. It might have to do with branding or future ideas about the use of the barn, and he's welcome to speak to it. But unfortunately, I didn't win the convincing there this time around.
Thank you, Alex. Tyler, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just really, the owner of the building, James Brown, and touring around Kingston and everything else, black is, unfortunately, from your guys' opinion, for sure, very popular, and he feels that it looks nice. I definitely agree, and the fact that we had received received approval previously for the roof, black, and everything tied in, it just kind of made the building fit together. So one of the concepts there is that essentially everything that we put in there that's new is all just one color. So there's not bright colors taken away from any of the stonework. The owner is extremely interested in heritage buildings, knows about just about all of the heritage buildings within Kingston, and is interested in keeping all of that. I mean, we spent a large amount of money to quite literally rip down 2 walls, put them back stone by stone, so that we could use this as a school. It will be essentially a school for our business, training polygraph examiners. So that would be military personnel, police, maybe some private people, but that's the concept. Now, the idea behind the, the skylights, the holes in that building are far and few between and very small. So I'm glad no one has an issue with that, because it'll allow us to have a lot of natural light and heat within. So, and then additionally, that the door in the back, that will be below grade. So it's kind of the really only way to tackle it. And then I suspect that when we do get a building permit, they're going to require a steel door down in the basement regardless, just for fireproofing since it's commercial. So.
Okay, thank you.
We're up for the above the door. We can paint that for sure, whatever color. I mean, you know, we actually haven't had discussions about that, but it needs to be finished some way properly. The hole itself originally, you know, you can see the wood there, that's original. Probably not original, but it's definitely original since we've owned it. And that's why we fit the commercial door in that way. Whether it be aluminum clad up top for weatherproofing or painted in a different color, shouldn't be an issue, as well as changing the colors of the hardware on the door. Additionally, won't be an issue. We just use standard colors that was put in there. And it's kind of a long story. I won't bore you guys with it, but that door wasn't meant to be put in there. But one day we showed up and they were putting it in.
Okay, thank you very much. Remind you, we're discussing a motion that's on the floor. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just wanted to add context from my perspective, which is I think we have to consider other structures, and that this was a barn. And those openings, my understanding anyway, was that they were originally wooded over. A lot of the time they would have been open, which would have been one open gap as opposed to a window with trim in a house. So from my perspective, gray or dark gray might actually blend into the stonework as opposed to how the openings may have worked in a barn. The black contrast I actually kind of liked because it made it look like the hayloft or the different openings actually are doors open. And so you're actually sort of the same kind of idea of a darkened barn. You're sort of looking into it. And the other comment I would make that's specific to this one is I think the above the door should not be a separate color. I think that these openings were intended to be one tone. And that's why I like the black and the glass, because it really accentuated the opening as an entirety as opposed to adding dimension. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That really should close discussion, but does anybody have any final comments? And seeing none, then we have a motion moved by Don Mitchell, seconded by Ted Smith, 5 recommendations and 5 conditions. I ask you to raise your hand for those voting in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And those voting against. So I have Janine on the phone. Janine.
Chair, I believe her
has
hand is raised in favor, but if you'd like, we can ask her to unmute just to double check and make sure that is the case. But Ms. O'Reilly, you'll need to press *6.
Oh, hello?
Yep.
Hi, you're voting in favor of the motion, Janine?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. So that carries unanimously. Thank you, Alex, for that one. Thank you all who contributed there. And we move on to 181 King Street West. And I believe we have John Gerritsen in the gallery as well, who is introducing this one.
Oh, my apologies. Hello there. Apologize, I should have unmuted through you, Mr. Chair. I'm Philip Prell, will be presenting 181 King Street West.
Good, thank you. Welcome, Phil.
Welcome. Thank you. Congrats on your chairmanship, Mr. Gower. So 181 King Street West is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and this is an application for alteration. Next slide, please. Above are aerial views of the subject property and the general location. 181 King Street West is within the King Street West Heritage Character Area, so the design and siting of development should be compatible with the cultural heritage value and attributes of the area. Just wanted to flag that early on. Next slide, please. The leftmost picture is a view of the rear of the property when traveling south along St. Lawrence Avenue, which is one of the roads that abuts the property, as this property is a corner lot. Even with coniferous vegetation, this railing will be visible to the traveling public, even if momentarily. The other two pictures on the right are the current views of the recently replaced like-for-like decking on the property. Next slide, please. The property was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1987 through bylaw number 87-151. The property was designated due to its historical and/or architectural value or interest, where the designation bylaw states the following. Architect Colin Gerver designated this 1924 brick building for professional Arthur C. Nish of Queens. The central entrance, the entrance that's facing south, with fan lights and side lights protected by a small arched roof portico, is the main feature of this well-proportioned house. Importantly, the designation bylaw does not note the rear deck and railing as a heritage attribute. The applicant noted that the rear deck and railing that were previously installed were installed approximately 30 years ago. Next slide, please. The upper left-hand picture shows the extent of the railing for the peak Railblazer system. Importantly, the railings will not interact with the building masonry. The upper right-hand picture shows the proposed design/style of the peak Railblazer system with transparent tempered glass and modern aluminum railings, which will be 4 feet tall from the top of the deck. It's anticipated that this tempered glass will allow a view of the brick facade and will allow the black aluminum railing to fade into the background. The lower left-hand picture shows the black shutters associated with multiple parts of the house. The railing system will be buffed to match the color of these shutters. In addition, the dark railing will match the dark features of the house, some of which are shown in the lower right-hand picture. In addition, the lower right-hand picture also shows the previous deck railing in white, which this railing system will replace. Next slide, please. Staff received 3 sets of comments on the subject application and 1 confirmation of no comments. The 3 commenters noted a combination of the following points: that they had no concerns, that the rear yard location minimized these impacts, that changes were easily reversible, that the proposed railing system's material, lack of attachment, and/or appearance would not detract from the heritage attributes of the property, and finally, the designation bylaw focuses on other property attributes and does not address the rear yard. Next slide, please. As we can see here, this is our recommendation to committee and then to council. Importantly, staff are to be consulted on the final color and advise further or approve an alternative color should the proposed black railing color change. And with that, that's the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Good, thank you, Phil. Committee members commenting on this? Don Taylor?
Yes, I have one question. I noticed that the railings are supposed to be 4 feet high, but on such a low patio or a low deck, I think the building code only requires 3-foot railings. So why go to the extra visibility and extra cost of 4-foot high railings? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe I can address part of that question, although I think Mr. Garrettson might be able to address more of the personal reasons of why he chooses 4 feet. So in this case, because the deck is less than 24 inches tall, the building code doesn't apply in the way it normally would. So the height of the railings there aren't necessarily as pertinent with regard to the building code as previously considered if it was taller. But in terms of the reason why such a height would be needed, I believe Mr. Garrettson would be able to more appropriately address the desired height of the railings.
Mr. Garrettson, do you want to comment on that?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good morning, sir. Yes, we can. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of the members of the committee of serving on this committee, and also the 5 employees that we've dealt with at City Hall on this issue. The original deck, which was built by my son Mark when he was a 17-year-old, had rotten to the point where it had to be severely either taken down or removed, etc. I can tell you that the deck has provided a tremendous amount of pleasure to my family over the last 30 years, as we use it quite frequently, especially during the summer months for outdoor dining, etc. Prior to the deck being there, our backyard really wasn't used at all. So it has greatly added to our enhancement and enjoyment of the property. The original deck had a wooden railing around it, and I think it's more for safety reasons more than anything else. We have two small grandchildren that are visiting us quite frequently, and I would think that the small black railing with glass partitions in between is something that we prefer to have rather than have a completely total open space, both for aesthetic reasons and for safety reasons. If I might just make one other comment, since you've given me the floor anyway. This has been a long process that has gone on for about 4 or 5 months on what I would regard as a very minor issue. I was one of the individuals, together with Jennifer McHenry and a number of other people back in the mid-70s, that were involved primarily in designating the over 400 private homes in the Kingston area for designation purposes, something that I still totally support. But I don't think it was ever the intent to go into it to such a great extent as we are doing here. I would strongly suggest to the committee that if there's one recommendation that you can make, and I've already sent out an extensive letter to both the Chief Administrative Officer and the Mayor, to which I've not had a response from either one of them, although I did hear from one of the planners in the Heritage Department, that if any situation calls for a delegated use of authority of a city employee to approve a minor change such as this, then this is certainly the case. The amount of work that we've gone through, the number of employees of the city that have been involved on this relatively minor issue is almost unbelievable. And we've been dealt with very fairly by all of the employees, don't get me wrong, but I'm sure that the planning department and the heritage department have got much better use of their time to spend it on more meaningful things than on these kind of issues. So if there's one recommendation that I have to the two councillors that are listening as well, Councillor Oosterhoff and Councillor Doherty, both of whom I admire greatly, it is please bring in some form of delegated authority by allowing a city staff person to approve an issue like this, a minor issue like this, always with the notion that an appeal can be made to a larger committee in the event the decision or the delegation of authority is not agreed to between the parties. So I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate everybody's hard work in this, but I am sure that in this great city that we live in, where heritage preservation plays an extremely important role, especially in our downtown area and the City Hall area, the Sydenham Ward area, and the area along the waterfront, surely we've got better things to do with our time than to worry about a railing around a deck that will only enhance the property in every which way rather than the alternative. Thank you very much for your attention, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
No, you're Mr. Speaker. That's right. Thank you for your time and your comments as well, and your long-term interest in heritage as well. We are other members of the public may wish to add, and seeing none, looking for a mover and a seconder for the motion as printed. Don Campbell, Councillor Oosterhoff. Don Mitchell, I really meant. I don't know why I said that one. Further discussion? And seeing none, then the motion is a 3-part recommendation with 4 conditions. Asking for those in favour to raise your hands, please. 9. And Janine, if you can put your hand up and I'll know that that's a yes. Then I have 10 in favour and against. I see none. So that is carried and will be sent on to council. Thank you for the effort on that one. And we stay in part 4 and move on to 323 Rideau Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank you. And who looks after 323?
That'd be me, Mr. Chair.
Oh, good morning, Ryan. Welcome.
Thank you. And congrats on your nomination as chair. Getting pretty comfortable in that seat.
Thank you.
So the application I'm presenting this morning is at 323 Rideau Street, on the east side of Rideau Street, just north of Cataraqui Street. The lands are designated under Part 4. Can I go to the next slide, please? So this just gives you some context. The property was originally part of the former Bailey Broom property that was designated in 2015. It is now a separately conveyable lot, however, retains its heritage designation. Next slide, please. These are some current views of the vacant site, looking south and north along Rideau Street. Next slide, please. And of course, we're all familiar with the Bailey Broom factory and the recent restoration works that have taken place on this property over the last few years, and it's looking lovely. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the property is designated Part 4. It's also subject to a heritage easement agreement with the city, both registered in 2015 prior to selling the property. It was a city-owned property, and it is now sold to Raw Design. So it is. They are the applicants today. I would note that the designation bylaw has a number of heritage attributes associated with the former Bailey Broom factory building. Various ones include some more broader terms and attributes which are listed on this slide, including the visibility and legibility of those attributes from both Rideau and Cataraqui streets, and the visual relationship of other late 19th century and early 20th century industrial buildings in the area. I'd note that the full description and bylaw is attached in your agenda. And while the subject property at 323 Rideau continues to be designated, there are no specific heritage attributes noted on that portion of the designated site. So it's an important consideration. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at today is an application for new construction on the property, the vacant property. The applicants are seeking approval to construct a row of 3-story townhouses, total of 5 units, and 1 3-story semi-detached dwelling with 2 units, all with an option for second residential units in them. The townhouse buildings will have southern sloping shed roofs where the semi-detached building will have a flat roof. The buildings will be clad in a combination of red brick on the projecting front bays and either wood or metal vertical siding on the rest of the buildings. Flat metal canopies are proposed over the archways. Glass and aluminum railings are proposed on the balconies that are on the front and rear of the building. And solar panels are proposed as an option on the sloping townhouse roofs. Detailed sketches, elevation, site plans have been prepared by Raw Design in their agenda package, and a heritage impact statement has also been prepared by ERA and Branch Architects, which is also included in your agenda. Next slide, please. The former Bailey Broom Factory building is an important heritage resource and landmark on Rideau Street, and it helps to maintain that former industrial character of Cataraqui Street and the area. And while 323 Rideau, the subject property, does not include a heritage building or specific attributes, the introduction of new structures can have an adverse effect on nearby heritage structures or their setting. The proposed works are required to be undertaken in accordance with good conservation practices, such as Parks Canada standards and guidelines and the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, prepared by the Ministry of Heritage Sport Tourism, Culture Industries. Being a somewhat unique situation, that being a vacant lot with no specific attributes, the assessment of this application has been put together in a somewhat unique manner, as you'll have noted through reading our report. The key standard that this proposal is being judged against is from Parks Canada standards and guidelines. You'll recognize it, I'm sure. When considering new infill development, for adjacent build heritage resources, standard 11 is the most applicable. And it states, make the new work physically and visibly compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place, unquote. This particular statement has three distinct yet complementary components in its guidance. The first being that new works are to be compatible with the resource. The federal guidelines 413 with respect to land patterns and 414 with respect to spatial organization directs that new features should not damage or obscure historic land patterns or spatial organizations of the site or area, such as introducing a new building that is inconsistent in terms of scale or design with the area, or that is inappropriately oriented, placed in the wrong place. The proposed construction with its simple geometric design, minimal decoration and use of traditional materials, brick, glass, wood, metal, pays tribute to the former broom factory and industrial character of the area while creating an interesting transition into the residential neighborhood. Can I have the next slide, please? The proposed building type, a row townhouse and a semi-detached dwelling, are common in the area, with examples both north and south of the subject property. Most buildings on Rideau Street are located near to and face upon the street. The proposed building, while a modern take on a standard form, are of a type that is compatible with the land pattern and spatial organization of the area and heritage resource. The second component of Standard 11 directs that the new element should be subordinate to the heritage resource. With the slight curve in Rideau Street, particularly when one is heading north, and given its prominent corner location, red brick construction, and Queen Anne Revival style of architecture, particularly the Newlands designed office portion, the Bailey Broom Factory holds a proud and highly visible place in this area. To conserve this prominence, the new row house has been cited to be set back from the face of the heritage building along Rideau Street, with a further stepping back of the upper floors. Further, the new building will be over 22 meters from the north wall of the former Broom Factory building, thereby minimizing its visible impact and becoming subordinate to the heritage resource. The final component in Standard 11 direction is to ensure that new buildings are clearly a product of their own time and distinguishable from the heritage resource. The design of the new townhouses in particular, is clearly a modern take on the traditional row house form. However, new construction on a protected heritage property, as noted by Guiding Principle 7 in the toolkit, need not replicate traditional or historic forms for it to be considered compatible and appropriate. The new building's location, materiality, and scale, as noted above, are considered to have little impact on the heritage attributes of the former Broom Factory. While the proposed design is unusual, it does not detract from the heritage characteristics of the site and may, by association, draw more attention to the adjacent resource. And so staff are of the opinion that the proposal will uphold the heritage conservation objectives set out in the Kingston official plan, the ministry's the toolkit, and the federal standards and guidelines. Mr. Chair, we circulated this application to our usual technical agencies. Planning noted that the subject property is designated residential in the official plan and zoned a site-specific residential zone in the zoning bylaw. There is currently an active site plan control application in progress for this address. A full zoning review, as well as any outstanding technical matters, are to be addressed through that active site plan control application. We also received comments from members of Heritage Kingston. Those comments are attached in your agenda package, most in general support of this application. Some members noted concerns regarding drainage, tree cover, and snow loading, which will be addressed at site plan control and or building permit stages, as noted in our report. Can I have the next slide, please? This is simply the end of the buildings. And the final slide. So, Mr. Chair, staff recommend approval of this application, subject to a number of conditions, which are before you on the screen. And if you have any questions, I'm here to help. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Questions from the committee? Jalinka?
Yeah, I like the sawtooth design in the roof. I feel like that's a kind of nod to the fact that it's in the Heritage Industrial District. I'm just not crazy about if it's a final decision on the white siding. I just think it's a little too loud, and that maybe more muted tone color or heritage color could be used. Otherwise, I think it might stand out a little too much, and it already does stand out with its more modern design.
Good, thank you. Other questions, comments? Don Taylor?
I was disappointed with the explanation that garages in the rear were not permitted because the city fire agency were not satisfied. What that has done is forced this row of buildings to have garages entering from the street, which is very unusual in the area and I think regrettable. Is there no way of really arguing with the fire department? After all, the downtown area has a number of lanes through the blocks, and apparently fire department has sufficient access there. So I just wondered if there could have been any flexibility on that point.
Ryan, can you comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'll comment on both questions if I might. I'll start with Mr. Taylor's first. We agree, and certainly this has been a discussion since the outset with the location of the garages for some time in conceptual design with this, both from heritage and from just an urban design perspective. But this site has some constraints in terms of its size, its orientation, and getting a lane in the rear has just been infeasible. So it has not materialized. So I'm afraid this is the best way to accommodate access for the vehicles, and certainly I believe the proponent, Mr. Geronimus, and even the heritage consultant, I believe Ms. Reed is in attendance today if they want to expand on that. And for the first question regarding the siding, I believe there's a condition in the recommendation that samples of the siding is to be provided to staff for review, and we will take that comment into consideration. And I know the owners are seeking the best design for this building and the most appropriate. So we will have a chat about the color for sure.
Yeah, that's recommendation 4. Other questions? And seeing none, then we'll move on to members of the public. And I believe that John Geronimus wants to speak. So welcome to our meeting.
Thank you for having me and my friend and colleague, Lindsay Reed. Ryan, you already did a fantastic job of describing the project. So I feel like my work is done, but maybe we could just quickly go through this little presentation we had prepared. Lindsay's going to start by talking a little bit about the context. And then I was going to run through the design, but you've already done it, Ryan. So Lindsay, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's so nice to see everyone. Yeah, Ryan did such a lovely job. I mean, one thing we wanted to take the opportunity to do is rarely we work on phase projects where we get to go back to the Heritage Committee and show them what we've done and what we're really proud of. And this was such a great project because we were able to actually work with local trades. So the wonderful masons with Craig Beattie and Matt at Edgewater, and Karen Brown doing the window restoration work. So it was such a lovely way for John and I to meet people in the community. So John had these lovely photos done recently. So this just is an aerial view showing the transition from the historic area to the established street area. And on the next few slides, if we can progress, I just wanted to make sure that in our time of isolation, people have been able to go down and see how lovely it's turned out. So there's a view of the restored and rehabilitated building as seen from the street. very prominently, and including on the lower image off to the left, where there's going to be site interpretation attached to the bicycle shelter, but just clearly defining, you know, the strength of the heritage fabric in relation to new interventions. Next slide, please. This is our little Newlands jewel on the corner that's been beautifully restored by local trades, and which John has an office in now. And next slide. For those of you who haven't been able to go in the building yet to see how it's been kind of beautifully restored from something that was, you know, on the state of kind of collapse and beyond kind of reasonable repair to something that's kind of an active, light-filled, beautiful kind of working and gathering space. So I'll pass this on to you now, John.
Thanks, Lindsay. Next slide. All right, site plan. You guys have already seen this, but Rideau is along the bottom of the page. Cataraqui is to the right. So north is on the left. And this is just communicating the 5 road dwellings and the semi-detached dwelling. And one thing I wanted to point out was just the trees that are being planted along the frontage, because we recognize the garages are not ideal from the Heritage Committee's perspective. And we tried a number of things, but my response to Mr. Taylor's comment, I guess, would be a hidden benefit of having the garages in the front is it allowed for a lot more green space and planting area, especially in the back, much more generous backyards, as opposed to the design we had been looking at originally involved a lane in the back with garages in the back. There was so much paving, and so this I think is much better from a landscaping perspective. We've got 8 serviceberry trees along the frontage of Rideau, the same trees that are in front of the broom factory. And then in the rear, we have 3 new bur oak and 3 red maples being planted. And I think we're providing 14 trees and we're removing 13, I believe. And I know that was one of the comments that you guys had. Next slide, please. These are just our technical drawings, the next few slides, so I won't spend too much time, but the idea being the ground floor is the living area of the primary units, and there's access to secondary suites, either for the middle 3 row dwellings, that access is through a little vestibule and down to the basement. All the secondary suites are in the basement, but for the end units of the row dwelling and the 2 units of the semi-detached dwelling, those accesses to the secondary suites are their own private entrance on the sides of the building. Next slide, please. This is just showing the basement units. You can see they're generous studio style units. We've got some deep window wells, so lots of natural light. Next slide, please. This is the 2nd floor with really big terrace area overlooking, looking out to the east. And there's, it's just bedrooms and washrooms up here on this floor other than those generous terraces. Next slide, please. 3rd floor are these really big master bedrooms with terrace and balcony arrangements off of those as well for lots of outdoor space. Next slide.
Oh, 30 seconds more, John.
Oh, okay. This is the roof. Next slide. I think we're done, guys. This is, you've seen all this stuff. I do want to mention in my 20 seconds left, the sawtooth roof shape is going to be made with the parapet, not the roof itself. So we're being cognizant of drainage. I know that was a concern. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Seeing none, then I look for a mover and a seconder for one recommendation with 5 conditions. Moved by Jennifer, seconded by Don Mitchell. Thank you. Discussion. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I just wanted to come back to one comment in the presentation about no specific attributes. Especially in Kingston, I think it's really important that there are attributes. And when you look at the property as a whole, you know, the function and form of the property, the open space, the green space, really is part of the attributes of the original structure. And I know that a lot of that has been shelved to site plan, but I think it's important to say that those site plan elements actually are heritage elements. But that said, this is a huge win. I mean, this is an incredible win in my personal opinion, but everything's supposed to be judged on an application by application basis. And when I look at from the first time I heard about this and the condition of the building to where it is today and the really creative use of the property, and how balanced this development is when you look at all of the different considerations, even beyond heritage, and you look at all the different themes and goals of the city, you look at the different various provincial directions and everything. I think this is this has come back to a really, really great compromise and a really great balanced development for this area. The only other comment I would make is it's a real shame with where we are going with parking and where the future is going to be. It's a real shame that the parking really has to inform the site as much as it does, including the garages and including the parking for commercial, but being so close to downtown, but I understand that. And to the fire issue, I would say, you know, heritage trumps barrier free. And it's really unfortunate that so many heritage buildings are not accessible, but then Utilities Kingston and the fire department, you know, often trump heritage. So it's really difficult. And so to the applicant, the design of the building, I think it's a fair compromise, these garages on the front of the property. And I like the green space in the back. And I think the tree canopy is really important. And I think it is a heritage throwback to those tangible and intangible attributes of the property. So thank you very much. I think it's a great project.
Good, thank you. Other members, Councillor Ustav?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate Don's comments too. Don Mitchell's good. I agree with most of that. And I think this is a really good development and commend everybody for getting it this far along. I guess my question is more of a high level view of this area. How much more space will we see there? I mean, I'm really in favor of obviously a development in that greater area. And will Heritage be part of how much greater space do we have oversight or, a view of as a heritage here? I'm confused on how much more. It goes all the way down Cataraqui Street, and is that the entire area going to become something that we get to be part of?
Ryan, do you have an answer for that one?
Mr. Chair, I'm afraid I don't fully understand the question from the member.
I guess Ryan, think about again. I think this is fantastic that we've been able to use our heritage oversight for this and the Broome Factory Park. Beautiful, and I love the theme that we've got going there. How much further do we go all the way to the water, and how much is there more coming? Because I think this is a terrific way to go, and I'd love to see this, this kind of thing keep going through.
I can respond quickly, and then perhaps Director Campbell has something to further to add to this. This was brought to this committee specifically because it has a Part 4 designation on it.
Right.
So beyond those currently protected, they're outside of this committee's purview. But doesn't mean in the future we're not looking at other options. So perhaps
beyond that, Ryan.
Well, let's try Jennifer Campbell. She may have a different perspective on it. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, and through you. I mean, I think Ryan was conveying much of what I would share as well. This is a Part 4 designated property. I think the consideration and the opportunity moving forward, Councillor Oosterhoff, is, as we continue to explore the addition of new heritage conservation districts, which would come in under Part 5, there will be opportunities down the line. But heritage conservation districts involve a lot of research study and the presentation and consultation on those plans. So that would be the mechanism by which we would be able to kind of broaden the landscape, if you will, of heritage consideration in this localized region of the city. I would also just add to that when we do see development applications coming in through the planning process, we do have opportunity from Heritage Services to offer comment into those. And at times we can see properties coming in that have adjacency to heritage considerations or properties. And we are able to also provide feedback and input on that. There are also mechanisms through the Ontario Heritage Act that we could intervene if we felt it appropriate on a non-designated or currently even unlisted property within the city. So that's one of the reasons why we are always asked to comment on planning applications. So yeah, in the short answer is it's a part 4, which is why it's before you today. The sort of mid-range answer is in the future we could see a part 5 through a HCD application. And then the enduring answer is we always have the opportunity to comment on planning applications and bring forward heritage considerations. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Good, thank you. Other questions? Motion is on the floor. Seeing none, then you have, it's not been amended, so you have a recommendation with 5 conditions. Moved by Jennifer Demeter, seconded by Don Mitchell. Those in favour, if you can put your hands up, please. And Janine, if you can put your hand up, I will assume it's a positive vote. And I've lost Janine on my screen. I've got to put my hand down to find Janine, sorry. Okay, you can all put your hands down. Don't worry about that. Madam Clerk, have you got Janine's vote?
Mr. Chair, I see that Ms. O'Reilly is still in the meeting, but I haven't seen her hand raised yet. So I'm not sure if she's able to vote at this time.
Yeah, we're all in favor at this point. So it's not going to make a difference. And if she wants to contact us, she can. Otherwise, I'll declare that one carried as well. And thank you for that presentation. As we move on to 39 Brock Street, and we're now in part 5 rules. Ryan, this is you again.
No, Mr. Chair, this is me, this is Alex.
That's right, that's you.
Good morning again.
Right.
Okay. So this is an application under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act for 39 Brock Street, also known as 327 King Street East. It's to address the repair and restoration of the exterior of the building. So it includes a series of repairs and restoration activities, which I'll go through. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the northeast corner of Brock Street and King Street East within the Market Square Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The property contains a 3-story red brick Italianate style commercial building constructed between 1856 and 1857 and now known as the Anchor Building. Next slide, please. The objective of this project is to restore the facades facing Brock Street and King Street East. This property has not been well maintained, as evidenced by the deterioration of the windows and cornice over a long period of time. We have supporting information provided by the applicant, which includes a window assessment by Andre Scheiman, a review of the proposed replacement windows by Andre Scheiman, drawings of the proposed new Marvin windows, as well as details of the paint removal and masonry repairs. Next slide, please. So the subject property, as I mentioned, is included in the Market Square Heritage Conservation District, which is a Part 5 designation. The 2013 district plan notes this property as a fine and unique example of commercial block construction in Kingston. Additionally, the property has historical or associative value as an example of the work of carpenter, master builder, and architect William Coverdale, and as well has value as due to its association with Mary Atkinson. Furthermore, this building has contextual value given its contribution to the evolved character of the Market Square district. So the windows on the 2nd and 3rd stories, the decorative masonry, as well as roof cornice are all listed as heritage attributes of this property and are the subject of this application. Next slide, please. So a key component of this application is the proposal to remove and replace all of the windows, which is 32 in total on both the 2nd and 3rd stories of the building. The owner proposes to retain the existing wooden window frames and to insert new retrofit aluminum clad sash windows that match the existing size, design, and detailing. So staff was provided access to the interior of the building to view the condition of the windows. The windows are certainly original or early. They've not been well maintained. They've not been maintained regularly for some period of time, and they have experienced a series of poor repairs and renovations, most of which were not sympathetic to the windows' heritage character or design. So some of these inappropriate repairs that were noted include the installation of false window mullions behind the windows on the interior. So on the lower sash, we actually see it from the exterior. It looks like a part of the window, but it's actually just a false mullion on the interior of some plexiglass. This is notable on the lower sashes. There's also the removal and alteration of muntin bars on the lower sashes of the second floor windows, and as well as the replacement of muntin bars, earlier ones being more narrow and slender and more recent ones being larger and bulkier. So regarding the second story windows, Mr. Scheinman concluded that a lack of any exterior protection such as storms and or maintenance, particularly the reapplication of putty, has led to a state of severe deterioration. And in terms of loss, decay, and damage of the original fabric, the extent is in the range of 45 to 70%, but averaging around 60%. So as a result, he concluded that with such an extent of loss that replication, new replacement windows become a justifiable option. Regarding the third story windows, the loss, decay, and damage is more in the extent of 30 to 50%, but averaging around 40%. And in this case, these windows have not been covered, these windows are in somewhat better condition because they have actually been covered by exterior storm windows. However, given the presence of the storm windows, the exterior condition of the sashes could not be assessed at the point of this application. And he did conclude that these windows could theoretically be repaired, but that it would be an extensive program and they would require new exterior storm windows. So when we look to the HED plan section on windows and doors, it advises that period windows and doors shall be conserved if they have been identified as heritage attributes of the building. So both the second and third story windows have been identified as heritage attributes in the statement of cultural heritage value for the property. So when we look to the standards and guidelines from Parks Canada, conservation is defined as all actions or processes that are aimed at safeguarding the character defining elements of a cultural resource so as to retain its heritage value and extend its physical life. So this may involve preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or a combination of these. So in this instance, the preference would be to preserve the windows through repair. However, based on Andre's report, it is apparent that if repaired, very little original material of the second story windows would remain. So accordingly, heritage planning staff support their replacement with a new window that matches as closely as possible the existing windows. In terms of the third story windows, the threshold that was mentioned above in terms of the city's policy on window restoration, which talks about how much of the original material would remain if repaired, the conclusion was not so entirely clear. So heritage planning staff have decided to support either repair or appropriate replacements based on further assessment by a qualified heritage professional. So in other words, the removal of the third story exterior storms and a closer inspection would confirm the extent of this deterioration and determine whether replacement is needed. However, if the windows are able to be repaired, then there are some options to look at new insulated glass insertions or to have new appropriately designed exterior storms with proper ventilation. So these heritage planning staff have included conditions that relate to both these potential outcomes based on what is discovered by the further assessment. So we'll just go to the next slide. I think I spoke a lot about windows and I actually had included a few more pictures to help you out. So I will just explain these. So if you look on the far right of the slide, you'll see one of these sort of false window mullions that have been installed in the lower sash area on the second floor. And the top photo, you'll see the interior of a third floor window where we do see quite a bit of deterioration. And I will point out that the other component of these window repairs is the cast iron window hoods that are above the windows. They will be sanded, repaired as needed, and repainted as well as part of this proposal. So next slide, in terms of the replacement windows, the applicant has provided custom window drawings by Marvin Windows. And as noted by Mr. Scheinman in his review of these drawings, the muntin bars should either be true or at a minimum include a spacer between the glazing to give the appearance of an authentic muntin bar. Additionally, the lower sash of the second story replacement window should include a narrow horizontal muntin bar as currently exists on the upper sash so that the patterning reflects the original design intent of the 4/4 patterning. Otherwise, these drawings provided show a window that is a very close replica of the existing original windows. The applicant has not specified or finalized their color choice for the windows and the repainting of the window frames, but they have expressed a preference for black. Staff have strongly encouraged them to look at medium to dark grays, possibly with a blue undertone as a more heritage appropriate color to complement the newly exposed red brick walls. Next slide, please. So a noteworthy element of this application, which will provide a significant improvement to the heritage character and style of the building, is the removal of the white paint from the red brick masonry, as well as from the stone detailing. So section 4.7 of the city's policy on masonry restoration endorses gentle and environmentally friendly means of cleaning masonry when necessary. So in this case, the red brick, a product called Peel Away is proposed. So Peel Away is a biological product, as the name implies. The product is basically applied and literally peels away the paint. So it depends how many layers of paint are on there. It depends if the paint is oil-based or acrylic, how many applications might need to be made. But we understand from past practice that this is actually a very sensitive product to use for removing paint. And they have indeed done a test area, as you can see, I've circled it in red, and it was very successful. And you can see the nice, beautiful original red brick underneath. So staff is very supportive of this gentle means of paint removal, as it should not damage the brickwork and it shouldn't or remove the protective fire hardened surface on the brick. And certainly this will restore the former red brick facades of this Italianate commercial block, which is a heritage attribute. So the next slide, the very last aspect, which I'll quickly mention, is the restoration of the cornice above the third story. It is a wooden cornice that is heavily deteriorated with multiple visible areas of rotten decay. The proposal is to repair and replace the heavily decayed areas with new timber to match the existing profile and to repaint. Again, the color has not been finalized and a condition has been included that it be provided for review to ensure it is appropriate to the style and the heritage character of the building. So in summary, the proposed restoration of the facades of 39 Brock Street will provide a significant improvement to the heritage attributes and cultural heritage value of the property. This property is located on a prominent corner and acts as a gateway to the Market Square district. So the repair and restoration of the facade will help to ensure the long-term conservation of the property, thereby contributing to the cultural heritage value and attributes of the district. So before you've got a recommendation, I believe it's 2 slides. Let's see. Nope, but there's 2 slides of conditions. So you'll see all of those before you, which include all of the conditions I mentioned in my report, plus some more. And thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Where was Peel Away when we needed it in the past? I hope it works. Boy, that's a marvelous whoever found that one. Members, can you please confirm that your dash comments are being correctly recorded? And unless I hear a negative, I'll assume that is a yes from people. Thank you very much. Members of the public who may wish to speak or ask questions on this one, can you please raise your hand? And the clerk will be watching as well. And
I will note, Mr. Chair, that Andre Scheinman is in present, as well as Costas Dios, the building owner, if they wish to speak or answer questions in turn.
Okay, at this point, Andre or Costas, do you wish to say anything or are you going to wait? And I presume that's I am going to wait.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I do see that Mr. Scheinman has.
Oh, Mr. Scheinman's got his hand up. Thank you. Andre, welcome. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Chair, I do think there's an issue with Mr. Scheinman's audio. Even when he's unmuted, we are unable to hear him. I do believe we have a technical issue with his audio at this time. So perhaps if Mr. Scheinman can hear us, if he can exit and come back into the meeting, perhaps if Mr. Doulis has anything he wants to add at this time, we can go to him.
Mr. Doulis, do you want to comment on this?
Appears we might have the same issue with Mr. Doulis as well, Mr. Chair.
Well, let me give them the ability to come back at a later moment after or during committee members speaking, whenever we're able to get them back on. So committee members, comments, questions? Don Taylor.
Well, it's wonderful that this important building is going to be renovated, and certainly looking forward to it. Thank Andre for his very thorough investigation, and we don't quite know exactly how everything will come out, but I'm sure it will be very good. I had a couple of questions. Somewhere in this presentation, the suggestion of what's called Pilkington Spacia window replacements was mentioned. I'm not familiar.
Oh, and now you've lost your sound as well, Don. In fact, you've frozen. And any suggestions on that, Madam Clerk, before I go on to the next speaker?
Again, Mr. Chair, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties. If perhaps Mr. Taylor can hear us and he wants to exit and come back in, that's really the only option that we have. If Ms. McFarlane wants to maybe go ahead, we can try and get Mr. Taylor back.
Go on to you then, Jane.
Great, thanks for all of that. I'm glad that staff has mentioned the third story windows, because I think that if we're following the window policy, then it does require close monitoring. And it would be great if these could be restored and repaired, because they are heritage attributes. So hopefully that will be the outcome. I would also like to suggest to the owner if perhaps there could be some photo documentation of these windows if they are not going to be restored and repaired. I think it's worthwhile to have that in the city files. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Elizabeth, again, I have a hand up from Holly James, and I'm not sure whether she's a member of the public, member of the company, or where she fits in.
Mr. Chair, I do believe she is representative of the applicant.
In that case, with the problems that we're having, if Holly, if you would like to unmute yourself and speak, please do.
Oh, just give me 1 sec. I think I'm on my...
Yes, you're okay now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My apologies. I think we're having some technical issues on my side here as well. Holly, would you mind muting your for a minute? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, that's a little better. Hi, everyone. My name is Kostas Doulis, and I'm one of the owners of the building and the applicant. I appreciate you taking the time to review our proposal. This is a significant capital expenditure for us, and without any real increase in any revenue derived from these capital expenditures. So we're going to be going to the bank for some financing, and I believe the budget for this is somewhere in the round of $450,000 to close to $500,000. The windows, I think, would have been great if we could preserve them, but as Mr. Scheinman suggested or noted in his application, the second floor is certainly, and in my opinion, I believe they're worse than 60% deteriorated. One of the main things is the lower horizontal mutton bar has been completely removed from any of the second floor windows, and the vertical mullion is kind of replaced with an interior false mullion. The third story windows, I know, are difficult to assess. We'll try to get a better understanding of that. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know how we can reconcile and have the building look, I guess, symmetrical and appealing by restoring third story windows and replacing second story windows. I think it's going to be a very difficult thing to achieve. And I believe that the third story windows are in significantly worse repair than initially addressed by the fact, I think, that Ms. Thompson noted that there are very differences in the thickness of the mullion bars on the third story. It's saying that some of them have been replaced and some of them have not. So I don't know if there's any significant portion of the original windows that will be retained by attempting to repair them. We do want to keep and retain the exterior frame. So I think that's one of the most significant parts of that. That's the bulk of the wood that's there. And I'm trying to think of, if we were to try and repair the third story windows, I'm wondering, like, what is going to be left if we're replacing panes of glass and we're replacing mullion bars and everything else. So I'm not sure how repairing them would retain a significant portion of the original windows. And as mentioned earlier, our intent is to keep the frame, which is probably the most significant part in the bulk of the windows. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me in the meantime.
Okay, well, we'll keep you there and hopefully we can get back now. Is Andre has disappeared completely? Is that right? I don't see him. That's on.
Correct, Mr. Chair. He's not currently in the meeting at this time.
Okay. And we were in the middle of members of the committee asking questions. And Don asked a question. Oh, Alex, you want to reply to that?
I was just waiting for Don Taylor to join us so that I could reply to his question, because I believe he was asking about the Pilkington glass.
Yes, okay, and he was there and he's disappeared momentarily.
Okay, well, I will wait for him to return.
Okay, other members of the committee who may have questions? Otherwise, I am going to, Donald Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I think because of our agenda, I have to ask a couple process questions of staff. I have a few comments, maybe two. So I'll make a couple of assumption comments and then maybe I can ask a question. I had wondered about, the LPAT has these sworn experts where you swear in and this person is acknowledged as being an expert in the field. And then their testimony is accepted with a relative amount of weight. So I had wondered about the process of second opinions, where one person gives a heritage impact statement and when is a second opinion required is one question. I had wondered about the process in terms of instructional documents and information that are provided to people. I know there's a hierarchy when you get a heritage impact statement, but I'm wondering about some of the complexities of repair versus replacement and that process. In this instance with a part 5, I'm wondering about the second and third stories, whether or not a factor or consideration was that they're not right up against the public realm. They're actually higher in the building. They're intended to be viewed from a distance. They're not the first story, and I had wondered about whether that was factored into the decision. And the other aspect I wonder if you could speak to is also the process, which is I'm a little concerned about rewarding negligence. In other words, leaving attributes till they deteriorate to the point where replacement occurs. But at the same time, I'm also worried about significantly deteriorated windows that someone is going to spend huge amounts of money year after year after year out of pocket money to try and save windows, and that whole constraint. So I just wondered if staff could speak about that, because it appears that we're using slightly different processes depending upon which development it is, and I'm just not certain what the process overall is to address all of these kinds of considerations.
Okay, let me go to Andre Scheinman, who's now with us. Welcome, Andre. You'll need to unmute yourself first.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. Sorry about that. Zoom and I have not got along well for a very long time. I thought I was here. I was hearing everybody. I was seeing everybody, and I enjoyed all the interesting issues that came before this. And then I went to speak, and I was mute. So I'm now, luckily, my wife has better luck with Zoom, so I'm on her iPad right now. I'm sorry that I didn't hear a lot of the interim discussion. I know Dawn was, was raising some key points, but so forgive me, but I'll just step back because I'll pick up on some of the things that I did hear him say a moment ago, because they're very important. So first of all, the fact that they're upper story windows really doesn't have a lot of bearing. The issue here is condition. And as Alex mentioned, the condition of the second story windows is really severely deteriorated. And I insisted on doing a window by window survey in order to establish to establish what state things were in, not to just do a general walk around. And I believe you have that survey in your package. The bottom, just going to the second story quickly, but trying not to be too redundant to Alex's presentation, but the lower sash of all those second story windows is basically gone. What looks like a mullion from Brock Street or the Market Square is a kind of faked up dowel with plexiglass around it. So that part is gone, is missing. The sash itself is largely, and just to comment that, and I think Alex mentioned this, while we look like we're looking at a 4/2 window there, they really were 4/4. But when the mullion was either so decayed, the muntins were decayed with it, and that's why you don't see anything there. You just see that big dowel that, admittedly, from Market Square looks not bad, but it's in fact a separate little structure inside, as Alex showed you. Also, all the rail to style connections, virtually all, I'd say 90% of the rail to style connections are all, and have for a very long time, been held together with steel angles that are now corroded, and they were held in place. They were put there because the mortise tenon connections at those corners had rotted a long time ago. And now, even with that, those are rotting. The rot is extended around those. And so, and any real woodworking replacement of those elements would take up, like to try and cut out all the decay from all those corners would take up most of the sash, and a lot of the sash is completely deformed. So really, there's not much left of those second story windows. With the third story, since I think there's a later report that I did that is missing, I was able to go up on a lift to look at the general facade, and there was sort of good news, bad news. Just to comment on the overall project. The masonry parapet needs a fair amount of brickwork repair. As Alex mentioned, the wood cornice is completely shot. Well, there's enough to use as a model, a replica, for the to get a very to replicate the molding profile. But I was able to see the third story windows from the outside too, a little better, because they have the old storms on them. They have those combination screen storms. And unfortunately, they too have the steel angles at most of the check rails. And so, those are essentially areas that would have to be cut out and replaced to repair properly. And you'd be losing a lot of material with that. The other thing too, as Alex alluded to, is that at that level, you still have you have muntins and the lower sash, but a lot of them have been replaced. The original was a nice fine muntin, fine narrow profile, but the replacements are all these much thicker ones. And you have these odd situations where on one side you'll have the original thin, on the opposite side you have a thicker one. So all that to say that there are a lot of issues with the third story windows as well. And you would be getting into a very high degree of replacement of actual wood in trying to repair them. The Marvin window solution has worked well. I would compare the situation here with the situation at S&R. What used to be S&R now is SR, where the upper story windows, again, window survey showed they were very seriously decayed, and the decision was, it was brought forward to the committee to allow a replica unit as long as they were at least wood windows, although metal clad, and with a simulated divided light, so that even if you didn't have a true divided light, you did have the exterior molding, a spacer, and the interior molding to give the same sense of depth and light reflectance and so forth. So that I think has worked well there, and I think there's many who look up to those upper stories and think they're looking at the original windows, and yet they unfortunately they had to be replaced. Another example of a recent solution is at 168 Wellington, the old Victorian Grey building at the corner of Wellington and Brock. That was a much easier call because all the original casements that George Brown had designed in there, except for one, had all been replaced a number of times, but the windows that were there were from the 1960s. So it was an easy call once the historic documentation showed the casements to move to that. But in any case, my point is that the casements were restored to those window openings, and I think that looks really good. And those were again a Marvin custom window. So it's with some reluctance that I say this, but I think there really is anything can be repaired, anything can be conserved with enough care and enough money. But I don't think it's reasonable, certainly at the second story, where you really have largely either deteriorated or faked up existing fabric to insist on repair. And at the third story, as Alex said, I see it as being right on that borderline to where it's, I think, unduly onerous to expect an owner to do that, to do that level of repair, when you're kind of over the 50% mark of replacement of material. And also there is the aesthetic thing. If you are going to do that second story replacement, then some uniformity in treatment to the third story, continuing on to the third story, does make some aesthetic sense. Though, as I say in my report, I think because you have the separation in stories, as long as everybody does a good job, the replica units are very well done at the second story, and a very careful and comprehensive repair is done at the third story, it could work. Anyway, sorry to ramble on, but I wasn't sure what questions had been asked, what the discussion had been. So there you go.
Good. No, thank you very much, Andre. I think we are in the middle of questions from the staff, from the members of the committee. Jennifer, though, do you have an interruption there?
Thank you, and through you. No, I just wanted to make sure that we got back to Donald Mitchell's question from
yes.
committee. So if I could, I'd like to just respond to that. And please, Mr. Mitchell, if you have more, if I'm missing something in the question, I was taking notes while you were asking it. So to start, I believe you were asking for questions about sort of how and what does staff provide when we're looking for something like an HIS. So I'll start there and just confirm that staff do have essentially a terms of reference or scope document that we can provide to applicants when they are being asked to produce a heritage impact statement, for example. And we also can provide them with example documents that have previously been received by the city in satisfaction of that request. So those are two tools that we do have available to applicants when they're looking to complete something at our request or as a requirement of policy guidelines or standards. To the question about the sworn expert, the question to the tribunal and those sorts of pieces, I think my answer is kind of twofold. The first is that sworn experts, in my understanding, are traditionally assigned by the courts and brought in to serve in that sworn expert capacity. What we look to at our level and in relation to our standards, guidelines, and policies is that we're more looking to the qualifying certifications and credentials or experiences that speak to an individual's capacity and expertise in an area related to heritage, conservation, assessment, or development. And so we would be looking to things like individuals who have and are credentialed through an organizing or governing body like the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, or in the case of heritage carpenters, we would be looking for individuals who have a demonstrated history of experience doing similar type assessments on similar type properties and or attributes. And certainly in this case, Mr. Scheinman is checking many boxes in this regard. I would also share that the city provides to applicants, we share with them a list. This list is not an endorsement per se of specific individuals and their expertise, but we do have a list of heritage carpenters, and this is an assembled list of individuals who do have that heritage experience. And we can provide that and do provide that to applicants when we are certainly asking for a heritage carpenter to speak to some aspect or assessment of a property as part of development. And so, our assessments and our requests for heritage input from specific areas of application field or practice, be they masonry, window assessments, anything, foundations, really is about that relevant qualifying experience. And certainly we like to see individuals who do have participation in an understood and credentialed organizing body or authority. So I hope that does help to kind of explain the process a little bit more about what we provide, but also what we would be looking for in terms of a quote unquote expert, or as we would say, an individual who has qualifying experience or credentials.
Good, thank you very much. And just a quick question, Jennifer, in normal times, the Heritage Resource Centre is where a lot of that material is gathered and where people can go in and ask the questions and say, do you have this, do you have that?
That is correct, yeah. And so we are trying to handshake some of that relationship, to provide lists, to provide opportunities, input, previous examples, et cetera. So thank you, Mr. Gower, for bringing that up.
Good, thank you. Don Taylor, I think you had a question before you disappeared on us.
So I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can indeed.
Yeah, sorry, I've switched to another computer and I caught most of Andre Scheinman's remarks, and I'm quite satisfied with them. I have a couple of relatively minor questions. One is I think the recommendation mentions flashing over the metal cast iron window hoods. It seems a bit strange to me to be putting a metal flashing over a metal hood. Is that really the appropriate thing to do, or would it just be a matter of caulking and so forth? And of course, rust proofing the cast iron.
Andre,
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Very good. Very good. I'm now sort of paranoid of that. I've been Zoom has
join the group.
Zoom has successfully traumatized me. Anyway, to Don's point, yeah, it's a good point, Don. I'm not sure where that shows up, but the consideration of flashing would go with that upper extended cornice below the parapet. The actual decorative cast iron hoods would not need that flashing for them themselves. When I was up on the lift, I was able to examine them, their upper their tops, and they're actually in very good shape, but do need either rust passivation or cleaning back to allow for the application of rust inhibitive coatings.
Thank you, Andre. I just make the comment to Ryan and Alex that since we cannot amend this motion, hopefully that has been noted. And I suspect that on a project this size, various other changes, maybe small changes, may be needed as time goes on. Does that satisfy your answer, Don? Yep.
Yes, and my second question, again, a bit of a comment, but it goes back to the black color again. But I know Andre in the past has often, when working on windows, has been able to discover the original color of the window. And I think that should be possible here. And I think staff and the committee should really push hard to get a color which is close to original and at least not black. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
No, very good. Very good. I'm still on. To Don's point, yes, I've talked to the owner about, as Alex mentioned, I think, or perhaps another speaker with regard to another project, moving away from black. There's dark tones. If there's an interest in dark heritage colors, there's kind of a charcoal gray that's very beautiful. That appears very dark in certain light, and yet is a bona fide period color. There is also the possibility, and I haven't discussed it with the owner, of doing a paint analysis, an actual paint stratigraphy analysis from remaining finishes that are on the windows. And there's certainly areas that have a collection, have quite a thick collection of finishes.
Good, thank you. And I point out that condition 9 does say that details related to the colours shall be submitted to the heritage planning staff prior to installation. So that is at least being looked after. Other questions from committee members? And seeing none, I will look for a mover and a seconder for we can't amend it anyway, for 8 recommendations with 13 conditions as printed in the agenda. Moved by Ted Smith, seconded by Don Taylor. Any further discussion? Last chance. Oh, you're going to give me a very good group. So voting then, those in favor of the motion as printed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm missing somebody. Missing Janine. Somebody else has disappeared. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Janine's there. 10. We're in favor then. So that is carried. And wow, that is a huge project. I will now say we're out of discussion times. And thank you, Costas, Douglas, for even attempting it. And we'll look forward to seeing what happens to it. We move on then to the addition of 85 Sydenham. All my papers in order. And I've forgotten who introduced this last month.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it was Phil, but I will be speaking to the.
Oh, okay. Report. Well, welcome. There we go. Good. Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. If you had followed the path that this application moved since the last Heritage Kingston meeting, in the November meeting, Heritage Kingston did review this Part 5 application. You will remember that there was a request from the applicant for the approval for replacement of 9 period windows of the property at 85 Sydenham Street. Staff then recommended the repair as opposed to replacement of these windows, and the committee then received the report, which included some assessments that had been completed both by a window representative, an individual who had architectural experience and was working on the project with some heritage experience as well as 2 assessments, preliminary assessments or assessments, I should say, by 2 heritage carpenters from the City of Kingston list. And in consideration of all of this and the standards and guidelines for the conservation of properties and policies relevant to the HCD, staff brought forward the recommendation for the window repair. This then went to council for its consideration and then approval, if appropriate, of the recommendation. And it was voted to be deferred and referred back to staff. And staff were asked to then consider 2 pieces of supplemental information that were submitted on behalf of through the applicant on behalf of 2 individuals who had previously assessed and provided comment on the windows and whether or not they could be repaired or should alternately be replaced. We were also referred by council to seek essentially a third party, if you will, assessment of the windows as part of staff's consideration. So at this time, the information report, and I want to explain this, and I apologize that I'm taking such time to do so, but I think it's important. The reason why you are receiving an information report and not a report with a recommendation to support is because staff have not changed the recommendation that was previously considered by Heritage Kingston. And because this is a Part 5 application and you previously voted to support with a vote of 7-1, and we are not changing the recommendation being brought forward to council, there is no move to reconsider eligible or available to the committee in this matter, which is why we elected instead to bring this information report so that you could see where staff had received updated information, where we had maintained the recommendation to repair these windows as opposed to replace, and also to provide you an opportunity to offer any additional comments on the item as it is before you as a matter of business. This will allow us as staff to take in any additional information the committee would like to share so that when this now goes to City Council on December 21st, we will have information from the committee, even though there isn't an opportunity to reconsider the recommendation previously supported by committee on this matter. So I hope that is somewhat clear. I'm happy to answer questions both to process as well as the content of the information report. But to summarize again in whole, we received 2 new letters to update previously submitted assessments on the property's windows by the applicant. These assessments essentially restated the desire or the recommendation for their replacement as opposed to their repair. Staff then solicited and requested, and Mr. Scheinman was able to provide a window assessment that he has then completed. And staff, in taking in both Mr. Scheinman's as well as all previous submissions, continue to see that there is a call or a recommendation or a justification here that if these windows were repaired, we would see somewhere between 72 to 98% of the window retained as part of that repair. And so staff are maintaining their recommendation that the windows would be repaired as part of the application that will be heading to council on December 21st. So thank you. And again, I'm happy to answer questions, and Phil or Alex or Ryan may join me because we have had many discussions internally on this application as well. So just want you to be prepared for a bit of a team carry if appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding then is that this is an information item, but you will listen to any further committee comments that may be made today. But no changes to the motion, which we cannot do anyway, can be made.
That's
and then
correct.
it goes to council on December 21st, and as per their instructions. Okay, who wants to make the comment? Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I would just comment because I've probably one of the causes for it coming back, or the cause I was asked to do that. And I really appreciate the comments. So I'm learning along the way too. But I thought I would just make a few comments about it. And I appreciate what Jennifer Campbell has said about this. So the only thing that I was wondering, I was listening closely to what we were talking about for the Brock Street one just before, where there was a similar kind of discussion on windows. And so I'm not a window guy, but I really get it, I think now. So it's about condition. And that line, there's a line of decision that needs to be made, whether there's enough substance in a window to retain or to replace. And so that if that's it, and it's a judgment call, and we've taken a third look at it, I can accept that it's going to go back, as Ms. Campbell said, no change in recommendation. I just sensed that there was a slightly different approach to the Brock Street one. I don't have the address, sorry, the Olivia place. I just felt, I sensed just myself that there was a really good cooperation there, sort of, and I like it because I believe in cooperation. I believe in expert opinion, and that's why we deliberate it so much as we're allowed to in a Part 5. I get that now too. I guess I just wanted to, as a councillor and a representative of constituents, that make sure that 85 Sydenham Street and got that same kind of sensitivity, consideration. And if you've got some incredibly good experienced people looking at it, and if I think the best intentions are for the 85 Sydenham, and you've come up with that, then I guess I have to respect that. But I just now that I've heard, it was timely to hear one file up against side by side, and it just feels a little bit different. But I don't really know 85 Sydenham that well. I don't know the file deeply, so I just wanted to say that I appreciate it going back. I appreciate the reconsideration, and that the owners on 85 as well can say, hey, we appreciate that we've had that reconsideration.
Good, thank you. Jennifer, you wanted to comment?
I think I would just like to add, I think Brock may feel slightly different in regards to what is sort of a clearer agreement, if you will. We certainly as staff, and I think anyone working on heritage properties, we appreciate particularly property owners who invest the time, effort, energy, and consideration into the ongoing maintenance of their homes. And I think what feels a little different is that I think with 85 Sydenham, we certainly see the applicant is really intending to do what is right by their property, if I may. But when we look at the policies and the guidelines, we don't see the justification for the replacement. And that, I think, is why it perhaps feels a little different, because the repair and the replacement at Brock, I know we're mixing files here, but I think what we were seeing there is some greater alignment, if you will, and some synergy around what the recommendations were leading us toward. And I think what we have here with 85 Sydenham is a heritage consideration, which has extra layers of consideration for the property owner that we as heritage staff are not always able to bring into discussions, updating of windows, a desire for increased energy efficiencies to modern standards, and even cost assessments. And that, is something we're certainly well aware of, but it is very difficult and it is challenging for us as well as staff. But we look, as you said, to the core, the meat of the matter. Can the windows be retained? What percentage of them will remain if repair is undertaken? And that is the primary directive of our windows policy and our HCD guidelines in this case.
Good, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Heisler, do you want to make a comment at this time?
Yes. Am
Yep.
I unmuted?
Yes, no, you're fine.
Thank you very much, and I thank you for your indulgence in hearing me and reviewing our case again. I believe Mr. Scheinman was on the site yesterday, and Mr. Scheinman was on the site on my behalf in October, and I don't know to what extent he's had an opportunity to review the windows. I have two proposals for repair of the windows. One you have well described by Mr. Strohmeyer. I have another one from Mr. Brown. And his recommendation was that the interior was not suitable, and he was suggesting that the only realistic way is to design and to construct storm windows to cover the existing windows that open to the outside. And then, of course, then he would take the existing ones out and then replace them, which would be an arduous process. But obviously, that solution would leave virtually none of the existing visible. Mr. Strohmeyer's solution requires a complete removal and the rework, essentially because none of the windows or the frames are square. When we bought the property in 2014, the building was in the order of 6 inches out of vertical. We managed to straighten the building as much as possible, but that didn't get into the windows. I think I can't add any more other than to offer to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to give Mr. Scheinman the opportunity, since we've seen your comments, but I think you also promised that we would hear from you. Andre? You've got to unmute first, though, remember?
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's very good.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so I was brought in on short notice to have a look at 85 Sydenham Street, the windows at 85 Sydenham Street, and admittedly, you know, we didn't have access to the interior. I was Alex Rouse Thompson and I made our way around the exterior, and to Mr. Heisler's point, I realized that it's a very challenging situation overall, but in terms of the actual fabric of the windows that remain and the importance, the cultural value of those windows, you know, it's my opinion that they certainly can be retained and repaired and restored, conserved, if you will. There's a lot of, almost remarkably, there's a lot of surviving material, including the very narrow muntins, and it speaks to the quality of the wood that was used in the initial construction. Now, again, I have, and as Mr. Heisler's mentioned, I did meet him there on site at his request to have a quick look and to see what my thoughts were. And I told him at that time pretty much what I saw or said in my brief reporting to date, and that is that while the deformation is really real, you know, what he's describing of the of there being very little of plumb and level left, either in the way the openings are, in the openings themselves, and the windows have deformed within that, and that creates all kinds of challenges. But the windows themselves, the actual units themselves, remain in really for their date relatively good condition.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, do you wish to add anything, knowing that there's not going to be a vote at the end, but if you have further comments, now is your time to make them. And I'm not seeing any movement. So, Madam Clerk, am I right in saying that we can conclude this matter and the report will go on to Council?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. If there's no
Okay.
further comments, we can continue
Good.
forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Scheinman. Thank you, all of you. I'm just looking to see. It's gone. Mr. Heisler, for coming to this. Thank you, staff, for reacting so quickly to Council, and councillors. Good luck next week. Okay, we are down to the working group reports. We have a Heritage Kingston Review Working Group. 2 pages, 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, which we need to receive. Look for a mover to receive that report, Don Taylor, and a seconder for the receiving. Second of all, Jennifer, got your hand up first. Thank you very much. Anything to comment, Don, on that report? No. Okay, good. Thank you. So those voting in favor of receiving that report, if you can raise your hands, please. And I think I see all the hands there. So that is approved. And Jennings is there. Thank you very much. Ryan, do you want to comment on the emergency approval at 167 King Street East?
Through Mr. Chair, I was going to take that
one.
Oh,
yeah, sorry, Philip. Yep.
No problem at all. Through you, Mr. Chair, just give a quick little brief assessment. So 167 King Street East sought an emergency approval to address severely deteriorated white colored wood molding in soffits, which resulted in internal leaking in the building. We were provided photographic evidence of this, and I attended the site myself, was able to take some pictures, and I can indeed attest to this severe deterioration in some key aspects of this building. The goal is to use a white colored aluminum flashing cover to temporarily seal these leaks and to preserve the associated deteriorating currently decorative features. However, importantly, the applicant has noted their intention to pursue a full permit in the near future. To this end, Heritage Services has introduced a condition in this emergency approval to require a full application be submitted to Heritage Services by June 1st, 2022 to replicate these interior wood features like for like and install these features by the end of 2022 to replace the aluminum flashing. Importantly, some of these features are right above some of the masonry work, and so attachment of this flashing, if necessary, shall follow the city's masonry policy. It is our full intention that once this aluminum flashing is implemented, that it will be removed in short order. It's only currently being proposed for the leaking and to preserve the existing decorative features that are already on the property that could get more deteriorated over this winter season. Thank you. Good. Thank you, Phil. Any questions, comments on that? Everybody wrote down June the 1st, so we'll be looking for what happens there. G here, appointments to the Heritage Properties Working Group, and H is the Heritage Assets Working Group. You have names there. If anybody wishes to volunteer for those committees, now's the time to do so. We can take an extra volunteer. I know you were all asked at one point. Okay, seeing none then, I'm looking for, firstly, the Heritage Properties Working Group, a mover and a seconder for that, for approval of that, those members, Don Taylor and Ted Smith. Thank you very much. Further discussion? And seeing none, those in favor and those opposed. And I think we've got everybody there. Secondly, the Heritage Assets Working Group, Leah Cox, Kathy Carcutt, Barbara Neatby, Jennifer Nicol and Bill Weiser, be appointed for a 2-year term. More volunteers?
Seeing none, then looking for a mover of the printed motion. Councillor Doherty and seconder. Paul Benfield, thank you, Paul. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favour of those appointments. And I see hands all over. Thank you very much. There are no motions, notices of motion for January. And seeing no movement there. And other business, two last items. Jennifer, I believe you're going to give us an answer on Princess Street United Church.
Thank you, and through you. Committee will remember that Chair Gower offered this question in October, and then in November, because he stepped out of the meeting early, it was deferred for a response at today's meeting. So I just wanted to start by reminding everyone that the two questions I'll be speaking to that were raised by Mr. Gower were, what is the status of the funding and has it been canceled in relationship to the property at Princess Street United, in particular the manse? And then the second is, what is the status of the application, given that the committee had understood that there was a requirement for demolition by December 31st, 2020. So I'm looking to notes, but it is a bit of a story. So to the first question of the status of funding, and if it has been canceled, excuse me, it's our understanding as staff, and I have spoken to groups within the planning services unit as well, that the applicant was ultimately unsuccessful in receiving what they were applying for, which we understood to be Rapid Housing Initiative funding in the first round of their application. However, we do understand that those application cycles are ongoing and they are continuing to pursue funding through that program as well as through additional government sources. To the second question, and the more complicated component of this, what is the status of the application? And particularly given that there was an understanding, at least from a comment made at committee, that there was a demolition required by December 31st, 2020. And there was a secondary part to that question about whether the application was required to be started anew. So demolition by December 31st was not a condition of the approval as written in the staff report or as presented by staff to committee or to council. The approval path for the heritage alterations actually extended beyond the discussion that was held in the October Heritage Kingston meeting. So the Heritage Kingston report was received in October of 2020, and it was with a vote to support the request for demolition of the manse with a support of 5-3 from committee. It then moved to council, and council received the report on November 3rd, including the supported recommendation from committee. The report was then deferred by council with a request and a referral to staff to seek additional information on the demolition proposal, the possibility to relocate the building, and to then return to staff with a supplemental report for council's then consideration. Council then received the deferred report as well as a supplemental report on November 17. Relocation was ruled out. There was no viable path or group that was interested in relocating and assuming the property of the manse and receiving it for installation elsewhere appropriately within the city. Council approved the recommendation then before it on November 17, which included its approval for the demolition of the manse. However, council did introduce an additional condition at that time, which was that the manse was not to be demolished unless there was or until there was a heritage easement agreement approved by council and registered on title at the property. This decision of council was related to site plan control application timelines and ensuring flexibility regarding the timing of the demolition. The desire and the discussions that followed really centered around a desire not to see the manse demolished without approvals in place for a new building to be fairly quickly undertaken thereafter, to avoid the removal of the heritage asset and then for the property to lay empty essentially while other approvals were being sought. So the heritage easement agreement on the manse then returned to Heritage Kingston for consideration on December 16th. And the heritage easement agreement was approved by council on January 12th, 2021. As you can see by this timeline, heritage approvals from council were actually not offered until the December 31st timeline had in fact already passed. And the HEA, which is now enacted and registered on title, and the permit that would include the demolition request are valid for 3 years. If the building is not removed in that 3-year time limit, then the permit can be extended under delegated approval through the director for a 1-year period. If that then 1-year period of extension expires, then a new approval would need to be sought. The heritage easement agreement, of course, is registered on title, but it is attached to the permit. And so we would then be in a situation where an application could be restarted. But at this time, they have a valid permit, they have a registered on title heritage easement agreement, and we have, in coordination and discussion with the planning department, received some feedback that they have begun to discuss how to move forward with that demolition action. And also, I just wanted to share, the HEA also included, in addition to notifying Heritage Services staff that the demolition was underway or was scheduled to happen, it also sets timelines and provisions for a timeline where new construction has to commence. And again, this speaks to the concern of council, and I think the extended concern of committee, that if the building were to be removed, we don't want to see a vacant lot sitting in its place waiting for construction approvals.
Good, thank you very much indeed. The new question is that at the last council meeting, which approved the 2022 budget, there was monies set aside under Heritage Services for the Market Square HCD to be expanded. And I won't ask you to come up with that answer now, but maybe for, well, we've had a long meeting. Maybe for next month, you could come up with some idea of what the plans are for Market Square.
I have an answer now. It will not nearly be as short, if I may.
Okay.
The consideration of the expansion of the Market Square Heritage Conservation District is really meant to provide an expansion and consideration of properties adjacent and along the streetscape of Brock, Princess, and other adjacent streets. This is really a consideration that we want to bring alongside of the second phase of the Central Kingston Growth Strategy, which looks at the opportunities to provide infill development in areas in Central Kingston. And right now, we don't have an HCD consideration or a collective consideration of the properties that could expand out from the Market Square. So that is our intent right now. This is at a very preliminary stage of consideration, but the monies that were set aside then were to look at how we could expand potentially the HCD to capture particularly some of those properties that front onto what we would consider some of the primary heritage corridors into the downtown and arriving at the Market Square district. So that is what that money was set aside to do in 2022.
Great, thank you very, very much. I believe that unless there is other business, that concludes our business for today. So I look for a motion for adjournment. Councillor Doherty, Jane McFarlane, anybody possibly against? Well, thank you all very much for that long meeting and have a good season. And we see you all sometime in January. Yep, take care all. Thanks indeed. Goodbye.